Hello, Sabina Brennan here, host of Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. It takes just 30 seconds on Google or Apple Pay to make a one-off donation to support this show. Simply follow the Support This Show link in the show or episode description. Cheers. Hello and welcome to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. My name is Sabina Brennan and my guest this week is the wonderful Anne Griffin. Through the lens of Anne's brilliant debut novel, When All Is Said, we chat about kindness, self-love, loneliness, being human, the pursuit of happiness, eschewing perfection and our own very special brand of guilt. First of all, thank you very much, Anne Griffin, for coming here, and congratulations on your wonderful #1 bestseller, your first novel, When All Is Said. I had started to read this a good long time ago, and then you agreed to be a guest on the show, and so I saved it to read closer because I just think, you know, it's so fresh, and to be honest, before I came down to the studio, I had to dry a few tears away. It is a wonderful book. Congratulations. I'm looking at the cover of it now as I speak. Masterful storytelling from Graham Norton. But it is. It's fabulous. And it's a wonderful idea. If you haven't read it, go get a copy. I'm going to be loaning this very copy to my editor and producer, Emily, to read.
I'm always so grateful, though, when people say they've read my book. And I know that sounds bad, but I really genuinely am. I'm like, thank you so much. You know, it's such an honour for somebody to read something that I wrote, you know.
To take the time and invest hours in. So and especially, I want to kind of talk to you about that. There's an interesting passage. It's a bit on in the book where Morris talks about earwigging. And I hadn't heard that phrase for a very long time. It was something my mother used to say to me. Don't be earwigging. Out when she'd be having an adult conversation or whatever. Hadn't heard the phrase for a long time. But Morris is the main character in the book, the narrator of the book. And he says, you know, I didn't realise I was such an earwigger. And he is on a trip to the States at this point. And he said, it has helped me realise that we're all the same, as in humans, because he's earwigging on all these conversations in the United States. And he's a farmer, you know, really, I suppose, a rather insular life.
Very insular.
If you think of it.
And self-made insular. He wants it that way. It's very important to him.
And it's very interesting because I do want to kind of come back to that, those choices and those issues around that. But he said it made him realise that we're all the same, which I, you know, totally agree with. I wish people would understand that we're just all human beings first, and then we would have far less issues in the world today.
Expecting perfection from the rest of the world, which just drives me.
Or looking at the differences between us. You know, like even if the colour of your skin is different, you are still almost 100% identical in your makeup underneath that. You know, it's like saying, well, people with blue eyes over there, people with green eyes over there. It's very different. But he talks about this, and I was kind of curious because of your writing and reading it and the nuances and capturing wonderful turns of phrases, etc. Would you describe yourself as an earwigger? Is that something that has influenced and shaped your writing?
I mean, I think all writers are, aren't we? And lots of writers talk about this, and we can be very... writers can be introverts and extroverts, but I think the most that I have met are introverts, and we are people who are quite happy in our own company, but very much enjoy sitting within a group of people. For example, the airport. I love the airport because I will sit and I will just watch people. So we can be in a crowd, but we're very happy in our own company. We don't need other people. We don't need to be interacting. So in an airport, I am watching people, I am imagining their lives. I'm also listening to those conversations to pick up snippets of what's going on. And from there, my brain starts to create a story behind these people. And I've always done it. From the time I was little, it's something that I love to do. I am happy out sitting in bazaars. I haven't been in bazaars for years. Well, I've done quite a bit of bazaars at about 11 o'clock at night, last bus out to Mullingar, and just watching people and again listening, I would happily do that instead of, say, going into a crowded bar with a group of friends, even though I love my friends, obviously. But, you know, I'm as happy. You know, I find people fascinating. And so, and don't we all, but as an introvert, I suppose I take those conversations. They become my conversations in a way, and I bring them into my writing.
Yeah.
And I mean, Maeve Binchy, this was the classic thing that she taught everybody, or Russell Carroll Kelly, Paul Howard.
Who wrote
Paul
Russell
Howard, who
Carroll
wrote
Kelly.
Russell Carroll Kelly. His rule of thumb was Maeve's rule of thumb. So he taught from Maeve about that thing of when you're on a bus, listen.
Yeah.
Listen, because that's who we are as humans, and that's what you need to reflect in your stories: our humanity, our love of laughter, our upsets. Why is that person speaking in that way? What has happened to them that morning that has perhaps caused them to speak in that way to somebody? And so again, if you're listening to people having a conversation on a phone, and you know, and I do this myself, you know, you look at the phone and it's your friend, your husband, say, particularly husbands, and
Oops, okay.
I don't even say hello anymore. It's like, yeah, you know, and you're kind of like,
or I do the, is everything okay? Well, then I'll call you back.
Now, I have to say, in fairness to my husband, he's amazing. He is so the opposite. He's like, hiya, how's it going? And he would have a big, long conversation, but I'm the, yeah, let's get to the point. So I love listening to that in other people because it also reflects on who I am. And I'm thinking, God, I'm actually like that. You know, I do that. And maybe I should try a little bit harder.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. And I think there's kind of confusion around what an introvert and an extrovert is on our.
I love this kind of conversation.
Because the thing is, to be honest, I would describe myself as an introvert in
Would
that
you?
I'm very happy in my own company. But I'm perfectly capable of being social.
Yes.
And I'm very social. And when I am
Yes, you
social,
are,
I enjoy it very much.
Yes.
You know, like as you do too, I can tell. You like a conversation. You like an interesting conversation.
Yes.
But for me, I don't need that. I like it and I enjoy it.
Good point.
But I don't need it. And actually, that's something that that really kind of comes up in terms of Morris, you know, and later, and when he's talking about loneliness and people, the lovely character David trying to draw him into the community and stay connected to the world. And I don't think I'm destroying anything, but you know, Morris tries, but he knows himself enough to know, or he gets to a point where he says, I don't want that.
No.
And I think that's very important. I mean, I can quite happily stay here in my home, in my bed, in my bedroom for just hours, forever, provided I am doing something that engrosses me, you know, that I'm in my flow. I'm very, very fortunate. And actually, this is part of the reason that I do this podcast and why I talk to people like you about thriving and surviving in life is that most people I talk to have found their thing, you know, the thing that for when time is irrelevant. You just can get lost in it and you find yourself by losing yourself in a way. Yeah. And I feel that I'm fortunate to do that. And the reason for the podcast really is to just sort of show people, you know, that, gosh, you know, there is, you know, this is there for everyone. You just have to kind of figure out what it is.
Yeah, and it can take a long time to find that.
So that brings me nicely as well. So you and I are both writers, but we both, well, as you say, you've always wanted to write, and you were writing short stories, and you worked in a bookshop.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I always wanted to write.
Okay.
So this is because, I suppose I am not like those writers where from the minute they could walk and talk, they loved books. Books were a part of our family, not a whole heap. You know, my mum and dad
brought to the library every Saturday?
Yes.
Oh, were you? Okay, so we even had lesser.
Right, okay. But we did have like Enid Blyton's Mallory Towers and stuff like that. But we very much came from working class farming background. Poor. You know, we lived in a council estate. But my mother and father were very aware that reading and writing was an important part of our education, so we would be brought to the library, but it wasn't in our culture.
Yes.
You know.
And so your parents could bring you to the library, but they would be at a loss maybe as to what books to suggest, or because they didn't have that history.
Exactly. Yeah. They just let us off to find whatever we wanted ourselves. And so really I didn't come to really enjoying and allowing books and literature be my escape and my place of comfort in the world until I got to college.
Right.
I wasn't good at English in school. I would very mediocre marks, but that pretty much was my experience of school, that I just academically, I wasn't flourishing in secondary school at all. So I got to college and I did take English in first year. I took English, Irish and linguistics, which really amazed me. But that all went horribly wrong. And I ended up having a degree in pure history by the end of it because I failed my first year in college.
Right.
And so I had to go back and I dropped English, dropped all of those subjects and just took history, which actually was my first love.
Right, okay.
And it is tied to that earwigging.
Yeah.
Okay, very much so, because what I love in history is social history. I love people surviving.
Right.
How did people live through the 1916 revolution? Those who were there.
Yeah.
How did the women around that time who, before 1916 rising, were looking for the vote, were looking for emancipation effectively, and then had to put all of that aside for nationalism. And so those kind of stories just fascinated me, and I could do that through each significant period of history in our world, in Ireland. I loved it. So
you placed yourself in there, in the
yes,
stories, and what would I have done
exactly,
in there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't great on the military history, as I have always said. I'm sure I've said it 1,000 times in interviews. I couldn't tell you the years of a particular war. I was no good at those kind of things at all. It was people. And so I got my degree in history and I went straight into Waterstone's booksellers on the basis of I loved history. I wanted to work selling books on history, and in that I really, even though I wasn't an academic, I loved those academic type texts.
And did you like reading them?
Oh, I would, yeah. No, I really did. And for years in Waterstones, that's what I was doing. I was doing non-fiction until eventually the fiction buyers wore me down and they were like, you gotta start reading. And they'd come in and they'd hand me books
and say, you have to read this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I did English in first year, so I had read, I was reading, Jane Austen, Doris Lessing. I was, I knew English was fantastic. But it really was then hanging out with the fiction buyers there. So I worked in Waterstones for 8 years and there were some magnificent fiction buyers there. And I'd just go down to them and say, give me someone new, give me something. Yeah. And that was it. Right. That was the dawning of literature and the escape into another world and the comfort. And, it's that old thing of you will always have a friend when you have a book.
Yes.
You will. But I left Waterstones then when I was 30 and at that point I had worked in London for Waterstones and back in Dublin, and I was managing the beautiful Dawson Street branch in Waterstones in Dublin. So I'd done really well in the company. I could have gone on to do, maybe gone back to London or whatever, but I just... At the time, I was doing voluntary work with the Rape Crisis Centre, doing 2 years on the helpline there. There was
I volunteered too.
Did you?
Yeah.
So, volunteerism in our family is extremely important. That kind of community giving, giving of your time into the community. And I was kind of looking for a change at that point, and I thought, well, why don't I change into the community and voluntary sector?
Right, okay.
So I actually made a huge shift, and I went to work for Women's Aid, and I actually ended up going back to college to do a higher diploma in community and youth work.
Oh, I see.
And so thereafter started a history of working within the charity sector.
Right.
And so I did work as a development worker with Mayo Traveller Support Group and with an Irish charity in Dublin called the Southside Partnership, again working with travellers and working with unaccompanied minors. Possibly the terminology around that is wrong now, but at the time was so...
It's different, yeah.
So it was young asylum seekers and refugees coming into the country without parents.
Right.
So I worked with with them. And I also worked with marginalised groups within the south side of Dublin who were marginalised through, social and economic deprivation. So I did that for about 5 years. So really, this whole thing of writing still wasn't coming to me.
Yeah.
My love of books and literature, but
it's people. You see, it's people who are there all the time, because that's what I get. That my interest is in people and how we work.
Exactly.
And that's always been there for me. I think that's why when I read books, if they allow me, which actually when all is said and done does, it allows me right inside that man's brain, his head, his thought processes, everything. Any book that does that for me is the kind of book I want. A lot doesn't have to happen.
Exactly.
But just as easily, I quite like it if there is a mystery and a detective, and psychological thrillers are probably my thing.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the thread that keeps you going, and
that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And there is that throughout your book. Is, you do it just perfectly. You sow the little seeds, and and you go, I thought that might be it, or whatever, which is lovely. But there's a few things there that you've said over there that interest me, and it's the storytelling. And I've said this over and over again. Our brain is a natural storyteller. Whether you write it down or not, it does it in order to help us survive. It has to make sense of the world.
Yes.
So it's just making stories, and it's looking for patterns. And even when you're earwigging and listening to conversations, you're going, oh, I do that. So I do that all the time. I can't help myself. Every time I'm doing research on someone, my natural instinct is to find some commonality.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I say, if people just focused on that, we would have far less issues in the world. I do think, and I've spoken at length at various other guests about this, the social media puts that barricade between the human interaction.
Yes.
Where you can't empathise. And I actually spoke to Ruth Gilligan, the author.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, lovely.
Wonderful Ruth.
Yeah. She's fantastic.
Yeah.
The charity, the organisation that she works with, the things that matter to her, she works with an organisation that's trying to develop empathy. And they use storytelling. So it's a lovely thing. What they do is they get individuals from opposite side of the tracks, or, opposing whatever thing. And they pair them up. They do group sessions, and they pair them up, and they get one person to tell the other person something really important about themselves, and vice versa. But it's the person who has been told who has to then stand up and tell the story.
Fantastic, yeah.
Which is great, because it just allows you into the shoes, and I just think we need more and more and more of that. And going back to what Morris said that time when he was earwigging, that it allowed him to understand that we're all the same. We're the same as our American cousins, as he says.
Yeah.
And what he actually said, it helped me realise we're no different from our American cousins. The same things matter the world over. Saving face and money. And I just went, oh my God, you poor man.
Yeah.
It's just so sad, And it's very
very true
true
of
to
his
the
life.
character
Yes.
and of his life.
Yeah.
And he does talk about his victories, and I'll kind of go on to that. But they're the things that matter to him. And I'm really curious, what are the things that matter to you?
Oh God, I'm just thinking, I have my husband on my shoulder here when you ask that question. I'm thinking he'd possibly have a lot to say about this.
In terms of him saying what matters to you.
Yeah, what he feels.
Forget about what we're supposed to say,
okay.
right?
So
Forget about that we're mothers and we might be supposed to say our children and things.
Yeah. God, that's an excellent question. I think, kindness.
Okay.
Kindness. And I think it's a bit what you were saying about with that empathy. We need to find space for kindness and for understanding. I'm not always good at it.
Yeah.
And I fall down on that. I can be sitting in traffic and somebody will pull out in front of me, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake, what the hell did they do? When really, they've pulled out in front of me. How many times have you pulled out on somebody? It's just that thing of, we're human and we just need to give each other a break. Yeah. And stop expecting perfection from the other person all of the time.
And from ourselves.
Yeah.
Got to be kind to yourself.
You do. And possibly that's something that I'm not good at. And I think as humans, It's very hard. Yeah, that's actually the hardest bit, is learning to be kind to yourself. That's the toughest bit.
And Sadie's on the money in this. I thought that was very revealing. Sadie is Morris's wife.
Yeah.
And he overhears her talking to their baby son.
That was a very important section for me.
Oh, me too. It just really jumped out. But can I ask you why it's very important? I should explain it, or you explain it perhaps.
So there's just a 2-page scene in the book where Morris overhears Sadie talking to their 4-year-old son, Kevin, and he's just come out of the bath. And he's on the floor and he's playing with the Johnson's baby powder and it's going everywhere. But she's trying to explain to him that she wants him to always love himself. That's all she wants. And I find it very emotional, that scene, because that came from my life with my son.
Right.
That very scene came from that life with my son.
I wondered that. That's why I wanted to explore.
And it's funny, the editor who bought the book from Scepter, that's her absolute favourite scene. And I just find it so moving that it is. And I love to read that scene because I can feel it. I know it. I remember the words. I remember sitting with my son, him lying on the floor, and he's kind of going, yeah, Mammy, yeah, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm really trying to say to him, no, but it's the hardest thing we ever have to learn is how to love yourself, because I know I suffer from it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to love myself.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. My husband's sitting on my shoulder. My husband, who's very in touch with himself and in understanding himself and human nature, would say, you are not kind enough to yourself. You don't love yourself enough. And I think it is so common. I think it is the hardest thing for us to learn. So I was trying to, in knowing it's hard for me to learn that, I wanted to just say the words from my son to see if, well, maybe in me saying it to him, rather than acting it, and acting, loving yourself and him seeing me love myself is a much more powerful thing and a much more hard thing to do. But I wanted to bring up this concept at the age of 4 that a child in particularly, well, no, it doesn't matter what gender, but would just understand that there is actually importance in loving yourself. And so I put that in there, and it was very important at the time because Morris is certainly a man who didn't love himself at all, and very, very silent in terms of his own ability to talk to anyone about what was going on in his life, like a lot of men of his generation, like the way we all can be, but particularly of that generation. And I wanted him to have that moment where he's hearing somebody saying to somebody else, you should just love yourself. You've got to learn how to love yourself.
But it's even more than that, because I think the way it's written, it's beautiful because it doesn't just say love yourself, because that's vague and abstract. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
But I think it says, if you love yourself, if you always take time to understand yourself, if you're kind to yourself. I'm paraphrasing now.
No, but you're right.
It is more. It's also, so it's like, so I write non-fiction.
Yes.
Okay? And in that I have to give practical tips. Non-fiction is just based on practical tips. I want to tell people what's going on in their brains and I want to give them information, you know, but actually you have to explain why that works. Or you have to be very explicit. So lots of self-help you read about. It's learn to love yourself. And you're going to go, well, how the fuck do I do that?
I know.
You know, I actually don't. And you know what? And it's something actually I really want to write about. Anyway, but I think it's wonderful in that passage, you know, that you go from the love yourself and here's how.
Yes.
You know, understand yourself, be kind to yourself. And I think there's a third thing which I can't think of. But then Morris, the character, muses on that. Yes. Love yourself. Did you ever hear the likes? Do you know?
Yeah. But yet at the end of that, he says, and this is where he goes, maybe that's why you are the person you are.
Maybe that's why you are so sure of yourself.
Yes.
Sorry, I remember your words because that's what's so true. And you know, those early formative years are so important for all of us. Yes. But I think in two things, in going forward as you've done, for me that's progress. We can often fall into similar, and many times you said, oh God, I sound like my mother, or whatever. Yeah. But it is important that we also recognise
recognise things that didn't work and try and fix those again.
Yeah.
And I mean, I tried myself with my own kids, and then I, similar to you, to try and boost them, but also I failed miserably and said things on occasion that must have just destroyed their self-confidence or whatever.
It. And that's that thing of you were saying, well, I was saying we expect perfection from other people, and you were saying, and we expect it from ourselves, and so we're going to fall down. We're going to say, in moments of complete exhaustion, in moments of absolute stress, financial, for whatever reason.
For me, it was always PMT.
There you go.
Yes,
currently I'm doing the menopause.
Right. I love the way you say that. Currently I'm doing the menopause.
Yes. For a little while. I'm going to do for a little while. I'm going to see how that goes for me.
Yeah.
But so we're not always going to get it right.
No, but I think it's important to acknowledge that and let other people know that. I mean, I still see, sometimes I kind of go, gosh, even after all I did, I say to them, how come you don't have self-confidence? You're brilliant, you're this. And they don't. And then I go, oh, did I fail miserably? And then maybe it's a case of, well, no, maybe they would have been much worse, know, if it's hard. I mean, doing your best is the most important, I suppose, and intentions. It is. And doing it with kindness, I think, as you said, is. And I would translate that to empathy in a way. There's a lovely little book, actually, if anybody is listening. I got it on one of those 99p Kindle deals. I know they can be sometimes, the death of the local bookshop, etc. But sometimes they just throw up things that you'd never find or never think of or never buy. But one of them is actually a little book of kindness.
Oh, okay.
Have you read it?
No.
It's just a kind act a day or something like that, but it's actually a lovely little book. It's a really, really nice. It just gets you thinking about how you can be kind and how you can be kind to yourself and how you can be kind to others. And it's just tiny things.
And those things, what I'm learning now, I think confidence also comes with age, I have to say.
Yes.
But you constantly have to be working on those things. Like, it's not something like you read a book and done, grand, or I go to therapy for 6 months or whatever. And it's a constant work. It's constantly. So when they talk about, I don't do daily meditations or anything like that, but there is... I'm realising that every day I have to kind of understand myself again.
Yes.
So you constantly...
But I think that is meditation in a way on itself. I don't sit down and do meditation. Some days I just do.
Yes.
But then I find if I stop and think...
Yeah.
And I call it it's almost like resetting.
Right,
It's like a reset, and I kind of go, okay, now where, what, right. And then I go off again. And for me, I think that's part of the acceptance of self, is that there's cycles,
Right, yes.
So I do these sometimes as like spring cleaning, and you say, right, well, this is what I want to focus on, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do this, and I do that, and things are wonderful and they're great. And then you slip,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
then you do. And then I come back, and what I've realised is I used to beat myself up for the slipping.
The slipping, exactly.
And then actually I don't now. And I kind of go, well,
really
do you know
good.
what? Maybe I just need to relax and be off for a while.
And I think that for me would be my greatest learning. If I could learn that,
I'm older than you see, so the learning
You're
comes.
not much older than me. But seriously, that thing of accepting the slipping. And so I can talk the talk about saying I love realising who we are as humans and understanding, what makes us tick and why we do this and why we do that. So I can see it. I'm not always learning from it. I'm not always learning that there are going to be days when I'm not good at this. Yeah. And saying, do you know, that's okay. That's
my
But
that's learning.
problem.
You see, the thing is, I think what people forget is that in order to learn, you have to make mistakes.
Yes,
that is
exactly.
how your brain learns. And it learns it learns through shaping. If you want to teach a pigeon how to press a blue button, then a yellow button, then an orange button, turn around once in order to get a pellet, you shape that behaviour. You don't say blue, yellow, blue, blue. You actually give it a reward when it turns its head towards the first button you want it to click.
Yeah.
And you have to keep rewarding that. And then you delay it a little bit so that he actually has to step towards that button. I mean, it's incredible. The people who do this kind of scientific research have the patience of Job. But that applies to humans.
Yeah.
Do you know? We have to, and I think we forget that. We forget to reward ourselves for the tiniest little bit of progress.
Yes.
And we say, like that, my
I just
husband
can't
would
do
be
it.
very supportive. Yeah.
Yes.
And he he would say to me, "Oh, but you're doing great," and I go, and I forget that bit, and I go, "Oh, but for feck's sake, you know, I mean, you're great. You wrote a book," and I go, "Yeah, but like it didn't say, you know, oh, but it got number one in Ireland. Yeah, but that's only Ireland."
I know.
You know, it's
that,
but we should be just, you know.
Stopping
but I
and-
think
yeah.
what we have to remember all the time is we are humans.
Yes.
We're creatures. We're animals. You know,
Yes.
and some people find that insulting, but I actually find that really liberating.
Yes.
Because in acknowledging that, we are animals that are possessed of this brain that has evolved,
Yes.
that has allowed us to achieve these amazing things. And so if we just actually spend a little bit of time in understanding how it works, then we can start optimize and accepting how it works. And I think sometimes one of the failures of humanity is giving ourselves too much credit, you know, thinking that we're these higher order
we should just
creatures
be
than
able
we
to.
are.
Yes.
Do you know, we are.
Yeah,
We've
no,
made
that makes
incredible
sense.
progress, but I think we are always, you know, we are subject to our biology, to our evolution, to our genetics. That doesn't mean we can't change it, but you have to
Exactly.
understand it if you're
Yeah.
going to work with it.
Yeah.
You can't pretend it doesn't exist. I find that liberating, but
No, that is. It's really good.
there's one thing then I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm curious, and it has personal interest from me, and I'm wondering, does it come from a personal place from you, is that clearly Morris has dyslexia, and we
Yes.
learned that very early in the book. And it's wonderfully written about. It's sad and remains sad,
Yes.
you know, today
Yes.
for children, for anyone, even though
Absolutely.
we've come on in leaps and bounds since Morris's time. I'm even surprised
Absolutely.
that he is treated the way he's treated in the book.
Yeah.
But I mean, I even remember my father wasn't dyslexic, but he was a kitog.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
and he would
as
be
was
beaten
mine,
to write with his
Yeah.
his right hand. What that did to the brains, I really don't know. But
Dreadful, yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me, I'm curious. You're obviously something you feel strongly about because you write beautifully about it, and it's not just something on top of the character. It's
Yeah.
very much an essence of what has shaped him.
Yeah.
And later in the book.
That. So I was working for the Dyslexia Association of
I
Ireland.
wondered, because I know you do, but I didn't know whether it was around the same
Yeah,
time.
no. So it was, as I was writing the book, I was with them for a year, and I had actually shifted from being a development worker. I'd gone back to college again, and I had trained as an accounts technician, because what happened was I found doing frontline development work, I felt I was bringing far too much home. I was living the difficulties that people were living through, and I felt that wasn't going to help them a whole. I had decided that I wanted to remain within charity work, but I didn't want to do the frontline work, but I wanted to support those who could do that kind of frontline work. So I trained again because I'm a real good administrator, and I trained again to do accounts so that I could work within the charity sector and do financial management within the charity sector. So one of my jobs ended up being with the Dyslexia Association for a year, and there's such a wonderful team there. They are amazing people. And I actually shared, it was a huge office, and I shared the office with the helpline, the Dyslexia Association helpline. So one day I heard one of my colleagues on the phone where she was saying, no, you're not stupid. You're not stupid. This is something you learn differently. And she was wonderful in how she counselled this person. And when she got off the phone, it transpired. Now, they were always very good. They never told me anything about people, but something just came up that I realised, actually, this person was in his 70s.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart. And then, so being around in that organisation and realising how people suffered, and, you know, as you say, today it is much better. Children just automatically know, they learn differently. That's not to say there isn't struggles, but I just do think it's a much more normal experience that some people learn this way, some people learn that way. But the suffering that people before our enlightenment around this suffered. So it was really important for it. It just naturally came into the story.
Oh, but it shapes his whole life. It's.
Yes.
I mean, you can see. for me anyway, reading it, I could see his entire life through that lens.
Yes.
And you know, he had quite a good experience. You know,
and that was
relatively
important.
speaking.
No,
do
yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So relatively speaking, because there was other horrific stories, and I
Yes.
mean, I know at the time when I had my own concerns about my eldest son, it was reading articles around the fact that something like 70% or 75% of all people in our prisons either have a learning disability or they have mental health issues.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was the spur for me that I
Yes.
had to fight my son's corner and just find out what
Yes.
what is going on. And what you just said there, I do know when he got his diagnosis, and it was an umbrella diagnosis. I mean, dyslexia is very much an umbrella diagnosis, and
Yeah.
he wouldn't have a particularly common pattern.
Yeah, right.
But he just said, "Oh, at least I'm not stupid." Do you know?
Absolutely.
He had that, like, because he knew he wasn't
Somebody at
stupid.
31, wow.
No. He said it at 9.
But he's
only
31 now.
Oh yeah,
Like, so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
relatively recent.
Oh yeah. And I mean, there was kids in his class. Now I fought like a lioness. Do you know? I mean, and I did, and it's part of the reason I went to university as a mature.
Yeah.
Because I started working with him because the system was still failing him.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was told when he was about heading into secondary school that he should do woodwork and metalwork and all that sort of stuff.
Which
you
are
know?
great things to do.
Oh, fine.
But
he
what they were
wasn't good at
using,
stuff like
yes,
that.
but they were using it as a way
to
get
say-
him out of.
But it's
you know.
a total misunderstanding of what dyslexia is.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
dyslexia has nothing to do with your intellectual ability. Well, it does, but what I mean is there's this misunderstanding still, I think, persists, that dyslexia has something to do with intellect.
Exactly.
The thing that it has to do with intellect is you can't actually show and demonstrate your true intellect through writing and or reading.
Yeah.
Because the dyslexia stops you from doing that.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, and by definition, you must have a higher IQ, higher capacity across
Absolutely.
all things than how you
Absolutely.
are performing in your written level. If you're performing below average and your IQ and various other capacities are below average, well, then you're performing in your range.
Yes.
By definition,
Yes.
you know, in order to have a diagnosis, there has to be this gap. And in my son's case, a huge gap. And obviously, in your character's case, quite a huge gap because he goes on to achieve so many incredible things.
That was the other thing that I learned. It's exactly what you're saying, is that people who have dyslexia or perhaps other difficulties around academic learning and the emphasis we put on that is that these people are the brilliant survivors.
Yes.
So in the world, they have to go out there and work doubly hard. Doubly hard.
And people rarely
And it's hidden very often.
understand the exhaustion
Yes.
that they feel.
Yes.
I used to see that with my son when he went to university. I mean, he would go in and he would come home and have to sleep for 3 hours just after being at lectures for, you know.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, then have to get up and try and study like everybody else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you might get a few minutes extra in every exam to write longer, but it's not about that.
Yes.
It's about all the other exhausting things that you have to do and surmount. And even just like your character, and you know, who keeps it under his hat for his entire life and feels shame and embarrassment. And I still think that persists.
Yes.
And I know and I will check again before we broadcast on this with my son, but I have spoken about it before and he's happy for me to speak about it. But in the past he wasn't, and certainly when he was in university, he did not want people to know. You know, because that sets you apart as different. And I would just argue time and again, but if you tell them, they will then understand that, you know, your untidy writing is not carelessness, it's the only way you can write. But there is that embarrassment that there just shouldn't be. You know, we have a society, as you just said there, that happens to revere academic achievement. And I mean, drives me nuts. You know, late in life I achieved academically, but I don't see that as anything particularly.
Yeah. I mean, my son is coming up to, well, he'll be going into TY year, but as we're coming toward the leaving cert, I'm quite happy. It's like, well, you know, we will support you as much as we can, but if you don't want to be going on to college to do architecture or whatever, great, let's just figure it out as we go. You've got the rest of your life. I've gone to college 4 times.
Yeah, it's amazing.
4 times. But the other thing is, when you were talking about you fought for your son like a lioness, not everybody can.
No, that's my point.
Isn't
the
it?
point
And
I
that's
wanted to
the
make.
bit that, thank God you were there for your son.
Yeah, but my heart breaks. I shouldn't have to
Championing.
be there. I
Exactly.
shouldn't have to be there. And I know that that was actually my point why I said it actually, but I never got there. It wasn't to say, hey, look at me, I'm great, I fought like
Exactly.
a lioness. It was that there was another boy in particular in his class, and I spoke to his mother and I said, oh, look, he has this, and if you do this, and if you do this, and we work with, and I mean, I worked with Darren and planning and organising and all the rest. And she just...
For whatever
just didn't
reason,
have it.
she wasn't
for
able
whatever
to.
reason. Maybe she did. Maybe she. So we suspect my husband has dyslexia.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't have been that diagnosis.
Yes.
And he left school and became a printer. He was
Yes.
told to go and get a trade or whatever. And he would always fall asleep when he tried to read. Do you know? Which I think is probably just the exhaustion of trying to focus.
Yes. Yeah, that would make sense.
But it shouldn't be that you are at the mercy of what your parents' capacities are. And that kind of brings me
Very
nicely to
true.
another theme in the book, which I think I'll put it under the umbrella of parents.
Okay.
Or parent-child relationships. But you actually really cover and touch on quite a lot. I'm really delighted that this book is about a man and from a man's perspective. But being a mother, infertility, not wanting to be a mother, choosing not to be a mother, choosing to be a mother and finding it really challenging. They've all come up as themes, speaking to the people that I have as guests. I think some of these are things that men go through too in very different ways.
Yes.
And you explore those themes very nicely in this book from a man's perspective. A very particular man. I wouldn't say it's an everyman perspective, but what does that mean anyway? But it's wonderfully done. There's his relationship with his wife, their infertility.
Yes.
Oh my God, and Molly and folks, you really do just have to read this book. I don't want to spoil it on you by going in too much, but there's his relationship with his son, which isn't really giving anything very much away, because in a sense, in my head, he's talking. He is talking to his son throughout.
It's kind of a love story to his son, in a way, to both his
wife and his son. But it's also about his own relationship with his father. Like when you look at that statement where he says, we're all the same, what matters to us, that I quoted earlier, is what other people think, saving face and money. Yeah. That he learned from his father. Yeah. Really, and in a way.
I suppose,
when he talks about his victories, that's what I think. He's going, Dad, look at me, look what I did.
Don't we all do that?
Yeah, we do it. We hold it for so long, but he held it so long that he then couldn't be the father that he deep down wanted to be. He was so focused on saying, Daddy, look at me, in a way. Well, that's what I'm reading. I mean, that's what I love about books. I can see you looking at me. This used to happen to me when I was an actor, which scripts I'd say, oh, and she does this because that and the right, and look at me and go, do you know, I didn't know that, but that's good.
No, and that's what I do love. Like very often when I'm doing readings and people will ask me questions and say, I think this book is about, and I'm like, wow, yeah, God, that's brilliant. Never thought of that. And I
that's
love
good
that.
writing, I think, though,
Yeah,
because
I suppose
it allows you're giving space. You're telling a story, and you're giving space for people to do what you do on the bus.
Well, yes, exactly.
I'm reading that story, and I'm bringing my life experiences to it, and I'm interpreting it in my way.
Which is what writing is all about.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went back to college for the fourth time and did my MA in creative writing, one of the things that I remember being taught was that half of the work of a writer is allowing the reader do his part.
Right.
And so that means stop explaining everything. Stop giving all of the details. You need to allow the space of the reader's imagination. Yeah. And, one sentence to one person will mean this and to another will mean that. And the reading experience for the reader, it's like, for me, it's about finding your own understanding
Yes.
of that character there, reflected in who you are as a human being as well, and how your life has been affected throughout your many years. And it's just, again, it comes back to that empathy and understanding who we are as human beings, understanding our vulnerabilities. And I think that's part of why Morris has captured the imagination of people, is because he is a deeply vulnerable, flawed man.
Oh, yeah.
Very successful, knows himself quite well.
But in terms of markers of success that were set from
Yes,
childhood and from
which was
couple
all
of
about
experiences.
land and wealth,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and there's a coin that weaves its way through
Yeah.
the novel, which is quite a significant thing, because wealth is at the heart of who Morris has become, and
Yeah.
so this coin is kind of an interesting one as well.
But the wealth, his real wealth
Is
he
there
can't-
in his
in his wife,
and that's
his,
why
his children
on
his
this
child.
significant
his children,
night,
really,
yeah, that's what he's sitting there
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
That is the realisation. And he is very aware that he's 84 years of age. And flipping hell, it's taken me all this time to realise that,
Yeah. I like it too because, well, just because of my work in the ageing sector and how we live in such an ageist society.
Yes, absolutely.
That
I agree
this
totally.
is a lovely, very detailed human story about an older individual who matters, who we care
Yes.
about, who has thoughts, feelings, desires, love,
Exactly.
still at 84,
Yeah, and once
which I
we-
think a lot of people forget.
Yes.
And we dehumanize older people.
totally
and we
do.
other them like we
Yes.
other, people of different sexual orientations, etc. But I know myself that we still have a very long way to go on that, because anytime I point out ageism, I get piled on like you wouldn't believe.
Really?
Yes, people are not prepared to accept that they're ageist, that it exists. And it really is pervasive. And I think we need multi-pronged approaches. You
Yes.
can't just have someone like me standing up there and going,
Yeah.
this, and here's an
Yeah.
example. But a book like this
Yes.
can make a huge difference. Because not just for Morris's character, also for the character Thomas,
Yes.
is it?
Yes.
It takes us on this journey, and really at the core of it, throughout the book, is the thing that you just said to me earlier on, that you had to struggle to think about what matters to me, but the kindness.
Yes.
Because it is that thinking, what's going on in someone else's life? Why are they like that? And that's that thing, certainly, Thomas was the bully. I tried to do that with my kids, if they were bullied, and I'd say, look, there must be something really crap going on in their life, that the only way they can feel good about themselves is to make you feel bad.
Exactly.
It's, and I mean, it's hard to do that, and it's hard not to respond, because we have to protect ourselves. And if someone is going to threaten us, we will get that physiological response that gets us to stand up. But if we could kind of do a bit more in some regards.
Just on that, come in. In writing this book, I have been asked, and I have done many festivals, I have done hundreds of interviews. One person has asked me about the idea of this being an 84-year-old man and looking at the loneliness within society and how older people are treated within society. I think it did get mentioned. I wasn't present. My book is being presented at a festival over in Germany in the last week or so, and it came up there. Wow. That's twice.
I'm surprised.
It shocked me. I was ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I was even nervous to talk about it.
I'm surprised people didn't pick up on that.
And I was quite happy to write feature articles. So when you're starting out, you got a debut novel, your publicists are going to try to get you into papers, just, feature articles on whatever you want to write about. I suggested, can I write about older people in Ireland? And not that I was any kind of expert, but I just wanted to talk about why I've written this. Nobody wanted it.
Well, that's really interesting.
Just not sexy.
So basically, well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And we have to start making it at least because the thing is, it affects all of us.
Yeah, we're
if
going
we live
there.
long enough. And I think you capture it lovely, because it is not just Morris who is lonely.
Yes.
Throughout the book.
Yes.
Loneliness is a pervasive theme. But what I do like about the book is that you captured the nuance of it. Loneliness and being alone are not the same thing.
Absolutely.
And that's critical. And you can be very, very lonely in a crowd. You can be lonely with your family.
Yeah.
You can be lonely with those who love because you don't have. I mean, scientifically, loneliness is when there is a mismatch between what you need in terms of social connection and what you have. That's all.
Yes.
So that's what I sort of say, when I would say I'm much more of an introvert than people would imagine.
Yes.
I don't need lots of friends. I don't need to go out. In fact, I would find it a bit stressful if I had to, go out with people socially 3 or 4 times a week. I would be, but even probably once a week. Do you know what I mean? I am quite happy with, I love it when I'm doing it. Yes. But I don't crave it. Like I think a lot of people during lockdown felt, I'm going to go insane because I don't have people to talk to, etc. My husband, on the other hand, would be the complete opposite. He needs people.
Yes.
It's not that he needs tons of friends. He needs the banter. He needs to be talking to people, and that's what his job is. He's in sales, and he couldn't do it during lockdown. So he missed that desperately. So that's the point, I guess. Whilst we're all the same as human beings in that we need social connection and we experience loneliness, we are different in the degrees of contact that we need, and it's not a one size fits all.
Yes.
But it is important, and I say it if anyone wants to listen to it. I did a booster episode on loneliness where I speak about loneliness is no different than a hunger pain. It is just your brain informing you that you need to connect socially.
Okay.
It's just a hunger. You need to eat. Thirst, you need to drink. They're painful, they're unpleasant, they're aversive, what we call aversive stimuli. You need to do something to stop them because the feeling of loneliness is painful. So it is your brain basically saying you need to get socially connected. You've kind of become disconnected, and we don't do well on our own. And plus we need the interaction to keep our brain stimulated and working. So it's kind of interesting. But I think you handle it wonderfully, and I am quite surprised that...
I was too.
That people, gosh, isn't it funny what people see? And I think too, it's rather interesting. In a way, he found his own way to meet his needs of loneliness through his ghosts.
Yes.
Do you know?
Yes, no, that's true. It is. Yes.
Because they're the people he wanted. You see, that's the thing. It has to be people. Connecting with people is just not good. It has to be people with whom you feel a connection. Yeah. And he did that in his head.
Yes, he did.
And, I think that's okay too, because in a way you're keeping your head active and you're talking, but it's lovely the way he did it. There's some really wonderful threads. There's also the classic, and I would be really remiss if I don't talk about guilt.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're
classic
brimming
Irish
over with it, aren't we? I think we all are. I think every nation is, because
Do you think? You don't think it's a very specific Irish thing, or do you think
look,
we're worse
there
at
is.
it?
Look, we could go back and we could look at all of the issues that would bring guilt with it. I mean, we're taught it. You know, Irish Catholics are taught it. I can't speak for Irish Protestants. I can't speak for other religions within Ireland. I don't know, but I know, having been brought up in an Irish Catholic background, that yes, we're taught it. We're taught that this is how it is to be a human, because we're sinning all the time, and and I respect people's belief in that. If that's what works for them, fantastic. It doesn't work for me, but I still suffer from having been raised within that. What I find really interesting is that, so my book has been published in many different countries, and so I will get emails from people in Australia and Germany and Holland, relating to this book and relating to those. That was
going to be my next question. I'm dying to know.
Relating to those universal themes of certainly the inability to talk honestly and openly, that silence in families, and not necessarily guilt. Guilt hasn't been brought up so much, but certainly that regret.
Okay.
Regret.
The if onlys is the way
exactly.
you
but,
use the words.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a particularly, good brand of guilt here in Ireland. We do it.
We're going. We've a good
world leaders.
A good work ethic on the guilt. So the themes. So people see it more, rather than say, I've been talking to you in themes. Parenting, or people see it more like, almost that's been my experience in my family. That's how they connected.
Yes,
to you.
it's like that. You have written my uncle, you've written my grandfather, you've written my father.
Okay. So that's relevance and empathy, you know. I mean, you have connected at a very universal level.
And again, it's about that thing of just writing our flaws and our vulnerabilities.
But you write it so well, I have to say. No, you really do, you know.
Well, thank you, and it's lovely to hear that. And of course, I'm sitting here with my own insecurities, going, "Geez, how did I manage that? I'm really not quite sure how I managed it." You know, like you're still questioning. You were saying earlier about having to take that moment to say, "Yes, I actually did write a book, and yes, it was in the bestseller list in Ireland." You know, I like you, like everybody else, I'm very bad at taking that moment and trying to let it seep in.
So you the same as me. We're on a very similar trajectory. I'm non-fiction. I haven't had the same sort of success, but I'm just mean in terms of the work. We both had our first book published in 2019.
19, yes.
We've both just finished writing our second books. Have you made it to copy edit yet?
No.
Okay, I'm a copy edit, which
for
anybody is like
ahead of me.
almost get out of jail free. You know, it's like, okay, it's only how the book looks or the spelling stuff from here on in.
I'm supposed to be getting word back on whether the structural edits are done. I'm not even into line edits yet.
Okay.
So I'm getting word back on Monday as to whether I've actually managed to
might
achieve
get
that.
to the stage.
I don't know. I doubt it. But go on, Sabina. Sorry.
But the point I'm very laboriously trying to get to is, and it is about that. It is, in a way, I suppose, about not enjoying the moment. The minute I finished my first book, I was, right, what's my next one? And can I get a deal for my next one? And will they give me another one? And I'm already there on the next one. But these are the things I need to write about stuff that matters to me. Yeah. Just as you do. I mean, mine is non-fiction, but it just has to matter to me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if anybody wants any sort of tips on writing, you have to write about something that matters to you, because it's tough going and it is all consuming, really, and so you have to care about it. It can't just be, I want to get to the end of a book.
Yes, absolutely.
That's irrelevant. I have to get this information out of my head and down on page, and I have to like what I've put down on page. And
that's the key. You have you have to be able to say at the end of the day, I've done my best with this, and I'm happy for that to be put into the world. If you're not
happy...
And
that's hard, because you're doing it under a time constraint.
Yeah, and contract.
And you were the same as me. You were writing during lockdown, which is not the most conducive environment to creativity. No. You know, stress is not conducive to creativity.
Yeah.
And living with uncertainty, you need to escape. It can be a wonderful escape, but when we were all in that very high fear, unknown stage, you know, I don't know about you, but I just wanted to be there with other people experiencing that kind of, what are we doing? What's happening? But here I am, and I'm, you know, and I'm sure the minute you get to copy edits, you're probably going to be saying, what next? Yeah.
But COVID was an interesting one for me, because my workspace was invaded, because my husband is a teacher and my son was in school, and suddenly they're back in my workspace, and my workspace has to be silent.
Yeah,
and it was no longer silent. So I struggled very badly through it. But, you know, I still have my fingers crossed.
So you see, I think that's interesting, going back to what we were talking again about the introvert and the extrovert, which is why I would still argue again that I'm an introvert, is extroverts tend to need a lot of outside stimulation.
Yes.
And actually, years ago, my husband very kindly just agreed to get rid of a radio. And now he plays music in the house, mainly when I'm not there, or else when I'm listening to audiobooks. I can't cope with all that outside stimulation. It interferes with what I'm trying.
I can't.
So you see, I think they're the definitions of introversion.
Okay,
people
this is really
see
interesting.
Yeah, I think people misconstrue introversion with shyness. I think you can be a shy introvert, and I think that's what people see as an introvert. Oh, they keep to themselves and they're always inside their head. Yeah. Whereas what I see as an introvert, and I think some of the science backs me up, is you actually don't need as much outside stimulation as other people. Yeah. You actually can be very self-satisfied within. And I find, I don't know about you, there's so much going on in my head all of the time, that to start putting information from the outside world in there, I'm kind of going, really, folks, I've enough going on here for the moment. And then of occasion, then, you know, if I do want to take that break, and I do love audiobooks.
Yeah, okay.
it has to be really well read. This is one of the joys I'm having with guests on Superbrain is for years I hadn't been able to read just with work. Well, I mean, I have to read science and read for my work. And sometimes you're just too tired then, you know. But now I can read for work, read for pleasure and for work, which is lovely. It's been fascinating talking to you. There's a couple of things I just want to ask just before we end, because this is, as I said, about picking your super brain, about surviving and thriving in life. And I think you actually cover all those themes really kind of throughout the book, you know. But from yourself, just to ask you 2 questions. You can answer one of them or both of them, whatever, or you can say, you know, don't care, can't think, not going to bother. But really, what's the biggest challenge you faced and how did you survive it? And then again, on the flip side of that, what's your greatest achievement? When do you feel that you are thriving?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just not very good at kind of tapping into myself. Yeah, in the moment. I think this is actually, it's something I'm not proud of.
Right.
But I'm going to say when I am happy is like when I know that, for example, work-wise, I've done well.
Yeah.
Like if I've finished a scene, or say on Monday when I get feedback from my editor, if they say, we're happy, we're through to line editing stage now, I will be, because we're going on holidays, you know, I will be really happy then. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish my happiness didn't fall on just that. Should it not also fall on the fact that I am there with my wonderful son, who's had a fantastic summer, who at 15 years of age went off and got himself a job.
Wow.
And my wonderful husband, who, again, we're quite different people, but we complement each other very well. Should I not just be thinking, I have 2 weeks with these guys, that's the happiness?
It's really interesting.
Okay, great. So you're going to sort me out.
My husband and I really thrashed this out quite a bit over lockdown.
Okay.
I would be the exact same as you.
Okay.
Right? Absolutely identical. And it is a combination of, I got my edits back.
Yes.
And I got comments on my first paragraph from my editor that says, what a wonderful piece of writing, I think she said, or something. And I was particularly pleased because I spent a lot of time on it. It's a fiction-y piece of writing.
Yeah.
It is very descriptive passage. And I felt I exposed myself writing it. But that was the first comment, and I practically jumped out of the chair with excitement, you know, and ran down to David and I said, she loves that piece, and you know, it's like fiction writing. And then she said I wrote it really well, and you know, absolutely like a child. And overall, she really did love my. And she said, look, I want more of your anecdotes, which was great.
Yeah.
And you know, once you do this, I think we'll go straight to copy edit, which was just amazing. So that joy, I get that total happiness.
Okay.
But I think that comes from finding your thing.
Okay.
You know, the thing that makes you happy, the thing that you're good at, the thing that time flies by at. But I think for me, that's what happiness is finding that. Now, the world tells us we should feel wonderfully happy for, you know, falling in love and having children.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
But we've sort of done that. And that's the ongoing bit of it, I think.
Yeah.
And, you know, sort of my husband had his joy taken away from him of doing his job during COVID.
Yeah.
And was kind of, and he was feeling guilty that he didn't feel happy because, you know, he had me.
Yes.
And we have a beautiful home and we have beautiful children. And I was trying to explain to him, but no, that's okay. I'm not insulted by that. Do you know?
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's a lot of pursuit of happiness and pursuit of love. And I think a lot of books.
Yes.
Media, television, films have a lot to answer for us because they're pointing us in directions that may not necessarily be the ultimate source of happiness. Like, yes, you know, we are driven and you know, we do need to find love, and a lot of us have a drive to have children. And, you know, I would say over time, you know, yes, my children were an amazing achievement and I feel very proud. And at the time I was helping my son with his dyslexia. That made me happy if I got an achievement achievement and he got it.
Yeah.
You know, my other son is gay. I campaigned for marriage equality.
Yes.
You know, doing that work, that gave me my satisfaction then.
Yeah.
They're grown up now.
Yeah.
You know, they've got, and that started to change for me around the kind of teen years, you know. There starts to be a bit more space. It may be different for men, but I started to need more. Need stuff and need some of me to come out. And I think you and I are lucky, you know, and maybe in a few years' time you may be done with writing these kind of novels.
Yes, maybe I will.
And you may want to do something else, and maybe I will. And maybe, but I think the point is finding something that gives you joy in the moment.
Yes.
That's happiness. I remember years ago reading a self-help book that said should be banned.
Yes.
And I'm inclined to agree because that's your main character, Morris, has sort of lived his life around the shoulds. Not around the, this is the thing that actually makes me happy.
Yeah. I should just read my own book and learn from it, shouldn't I?
But you should read it again because you forget. You forget. Sometimes I have to read if there's been a gap before you do. I have to kind of refresh what I said.
That's really interesting. That's really good.
Yeah.
This is kind of like being a therapy session. Sabina. So I'm really glad I came along.
No, I'm sorry. But
no. Seriously. It's really good to get that insight and understanding and to be able to say, that's okay to feel that.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I guess that's the point.
Stop at the guilt.
I just look at since I sort of discovered the brain, I just find that really liberating because I just think, and that's for me, that's my mission. I say, and it sounds really corny, you know, I'm on a mission to help everybody release their super brain, but that's the whole point. We all have a super brain. You just need to kind of, it's almost like getting rid of those shackles of what you think things should be or who you should be. Spend a little time understanding how you work, not who you are necessarily, but how you work and actually observing, well, when do I feel great? What's that little moment? And then can I expand that? You know, it's a journey of discovery.
Yeah, I love that.
Look, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed every minute.
Oh my God, that's great. Can I just stay? Can you interview me just every week for the rest of your podcast? I'd really like that. That's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Anne Griffin. It's been fantastic.
I hope that you enjoyed earwigging to my therapy session with Anne. Well, I'm just kidding really, but seriously, talking is really cathartic. Just talking to someone can make the world feel a little less scary and a lot less lonely. I've included the link to the booster shot on loneliness that I mention in this episode, and I've also included links to the little book of kindness and Anne's novel in the show notes to this episode. I'll leave you today by suggesting that you be kind to yourself. And I don't mean go eat some cake. I mean be really kind to yourself from the inside out. Start by thinking only kind thoughts about yourself today. I love that the lead character in Anne's novel is 84. Tune in on Thursday for this week's booster shot. Is age just a number? My name is Sabina Brennan. You have been listening to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. Please take a moment to rate the show. Giving the show 5 stars would be really kind and would also make my day.